So, little Daddy E, do you know what today is?
Yeah, it's Halloween.
Well, it isn't actually, it's April.
Oh, right, it's graduation day.
That depends on my evaluation. How are you feeling?
Fine.
Any nightmares?
No.
Any hallucinations?
No. None.
What about the thoughts about mullets?
All gone.
I see. Well, before I can officially grant you your release, I want you to promise me one thing. You must avoid the people and the places that trigger your mullet-related impulses. Can you agree to that?
Yeah, I can do that.
Great. Do you have someone who can come and pick you up?
Hey, brother.
Hey, bro, literally. Let's just get out of here, man.
So, what's next?
I don't know, do I still have a job?
Well, Big Daddy D has sent an invitation for you to return to WCW, but it's not like it was before.
What do you mean?
From what I'm hearing, it's a much darker place.
What do you mean, darker?
Well, there's an electrified steel cage match in the main event with skulls and bits of old twig on it that actually catches fire at one point.
Wait, what?
And this is why I don't do the video podcast with you guys anymore.
Woo! Alright, thanks Nat.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome to Halloween Havoc 89. We're coming to you live from the Philadelphia Civic Center in the city of brotherly love here in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I'm Jim Ross, and along with my colleague Bob Cottle, we'll be calling the action, ladies and gentlemen.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the All-CAW Wrestling video podcast type thing, where we take a retrospective look back over the matches, main events, and of course, questionable haircuts of the World Wrestling Federation of yesteryear, courtesy of the WWE Network. Today, we pay another visit down south for WCW's first ever Halloween Havoc pay-per-view. My name is the Big Daddy D, and I'm joined here at the podcasting table by the Little Daddy E, fresh out of rehab.
You've been watching Lucha Underground again, haven't you?
Whatever gave you that idea? Anyway, the date is October 28th, 1989, and we are live from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Your hosts for this evening are Jim Ross and Bob Caudle. Our opening match is Captain Mike Rotundo versus the Z-Man, Tom Zenk. Zenk had just come over from the AWA, which was dying on its arse anyway, so he's apparently the hot new thing. Rotunda, in the meanwhile, was still treading water after the Varsity Club disbanded, following their feud with the Steiner brothers.
The newcomer Zenk uses his quickness early, avoiding an elbow drop and drop-kicking Rotunda to the floor. Zenk then targets the arm, but Rotunda grounds him with a head scissors, and then a handful of ropes.
Zenk charges wildly but gets tossed.
Oh my.
That leads to the rope-assisted abdominal stretch and a chin lock. Eventually, Rotunda hits a crossbody, but Zenk rolls through for the pin at the 13-minute, 23-second mark.
So the match got its point over with the young newcomer Zenk overcoming the experience and treachery of the veteran Rotunda, but it was ultimately was a boring match and not the sort of thing you really want opening of such a big pay-per-view. Anyway, our next match is a 6-man tag match. We have the Midnight Express and Steve Williams versus the Samoan SWAT team and the Samoan Savage. Yeah, that's what they called him. And they're with Oliver Humperdinck. What's with these names?
The Samoan Savage is Tama, who was Haku's old tag team partner from the Islanders. Quite why he can't still be called Tama, I've no idea. I mean, Fatu, Samu and Tama sound more consistent than Fatu, Samu and Samoan Savage.
It's Samu and Savage.
Yes.
Anyway, Ross says that all three of them are brothers, but that's not even right. Only Fatu and Tama are brothers and Samu is their cousin.
Well, someone's been on Wikipedia.
Here's a question. Why is Humperdinck managing them now?
It's not really explained other than that they're on loan from Paulie Dangerously. Alright, whatever.
Also, we get a rather disturbing, all too close-up shot of Humperdinck at one point. He looks scary. And ginger.
It nearly breaks down several times, but Tommy Young keeps restoring order. When they do get to one-on-one, it's pretty damn stiff stuff for those who like that type of thing. Ross refers to the Samoans as having brick-like heads.
Yes, those damn savages with their inexplicable martial arts abilities.
Heaton gets tossed and crotched on the ring barricade to the oohs of the audience. Fatu hip tosses Eaton on the concrete and the Samoans take over. Eaton blocks a pump splash and gets the hot tag to Dr. Death, who gets the hero worship from Philly.
They love him.
The Doctor is in, and he completely cleans house by tossing one Samoan onto the other two. Big power slam to the Samoan Savage, but Fatu and Samu make the save. Lane and the Savage do the worst neck breaker ever, and Lane hits an Inseguri. Humperdinck tries to get involved and gets a sound twatting by Cornette and his tennis racket.
If you work at the local Sports Direct, do not let this man into your shop. It will not end well.
Lane stops to find out what's going on and he gets knocked into Cornette. The Savage winds up on top for the win at the 18-minute 20-second mark. This would be the catalyst for tension between Corny and the Midnights. The match was brisk, stiff, and it never got boring.
Realistically, this should have been the opening match, no doubt about it. At this time, the WWF is definitely putting on better opening matches for their pay-per-views.
Gary Hart is backstage where he insists that there is no quitting in Team J-Tex, so they cannot possibly lose. Terry Funk says pretty much the same thing, only more colourfully.
Oh, Terry. Next up, it's another match that no one really cares about. It's Tommy Rich versus the Cuban Assassin. Okay, who?
Well, nothing much to say here. Rich is about 10 years past his prime, whilst the Cuban Assassin never had one.
Okay, so we've had the Russian Assassins, and now we've got the Cuban Assassins. Did we just take anyone but wasn't American and call them an assassin?
Well, let's just run through the list of nationalities. That sort of makes sense. Canadian Assassin?
Wasn't that already a thing?
No.
The Bounty?
No, he doesn't come till much later. The Irish Assassin?
Okay.
The Australian Assassin?
The Mexican Assassin.
The Mexican Assassin. Basically, you're not from around these parts, are you?
The Sealand Assassin.
Yeah. The Atlantis Assassin. The Great Britain Assassin. No, that doesn't work.
The English Assassin, wasn't it?
So, the Philly fans hate Rich with a passion, and after 8 boring minutes, Rich pins the Assassin with the flying dick to the mouth.
Wait, what? Not like a Lufes press?
Well, it was a Lou Fest press, but the way it sort of landed, it pretty much was the flying dick to the mouth.
Oh my.
No joke.
Anyway, backstage, the Freebirds have words for the dynamic dudes. Oh my god. Those mullets. That chest hair.
Alright, calm down. Take the medication that the nice doctor gave you.
Oh god.
Next up, it's our first title match of the evening, as new WWE Hall of Famers, the Fabulous Freebirds, defend their NWA World Tag Team titles against the Dynamic Dudes, who now have Jim Cornette with them for some reason.
Again, this is where the booking of the tag team division in WCW really doesn't make that much sense. We had the Samoan SWAT team beat the Midnight Express at Clash of Champions, and then the Samoans were beaten by the new tag team of the Dudes at Wrestle War. Then, at Great American Bash, we've had the Dudes get completely destroyed by the Skyscrapers, which now leads to the Dudes getting a title shot.
Yeah. The Dudes nearly get booed out of the building by the Philly crowd, which is hugely ironic today, considering that Shane Douglas would later become the darling of Philadelphia a few years later, thanks to him being the mouthpiece of ECW. The much cooler Freebirds get a massive face pop, even though they're the bad guys here. Welcome to Philly.
And for some reason, Garvin is the only one that remembered to bring his belt out with him tonight.
The babyface Dudes nearly get booed out of the building. They control the match for nearly 8 minutes, working in Midnight Express-ish manoeuvres with middling execution. The fans are just getting more and more pissed off by the second. Finally, Michael Hayes sucker punches Ace off an O'Connor roll and gets the biggest face pop of the match.
The announcers actually just start acknowledging how over the Freebirds are, and they really don't have much of a choice.
Ace blocks the DDT and tags out. The Dudes clean house, but when they go for the wipeout, which is a slingshot backdrop suplex, Garvin yanks Ace's feet out from underneath him.
Hayes falls on top for the win and a huge face pop at 11 minutes 27. Interesting for the crowd reactions, but that's about it. Next up though, we've got another tag team match. It's the Steiner Brothers versus Doom. Now, who are Doom?
Doom is the new tag team of Ron Simmons and Butch Reed, and this is their pay-per-view debut. However, they're never referred to by their real names and are just called Doom number 1 and Doom number 2. The gimmick basically is that it's just two large muscular black dudes in black masks. And considering that And considering that Simmons and Reed were the only two black guys on the roster, it's not really much of a mystery who these masked men are.
So who's the woman managing them?
Woman.
Yeah, that's what I said. Who's the woman managing them?
No, she's actually called Woman.
I'm sorry, what now?
Woman, real name Nancy Sullivan, first started appearing in the crowd as a dorky-looking Steiner Brothers fan named Robin Green, usually seen wearing a Steiner Brothers t-shirt and large glasses. Rick and Robin later went out on a date, where Jim Ross, of all people, helps Rick get ready for his night out.
Jim Ross?
And when Rick turns up at Robin's house to pick her up, she's got her makeup on and let her hair down, and surprise, surprise, this nerdy-looking fangirl is actually a smoking hot babe. A bit like the movie She's All That.
That's some good comedy there.
The Steiners liked Robin so much that they brought her on as a valet, despite already having Missy Hyatt as a manager. Hyatt got jealous over this other woman and told Green to take a hike. Green got upset and dumped Rick before going over to Kevin Sullivan, her real-life husband at the time and perennial Steiner rival. Sullivan found Ron Simmons and Butch Reed, these two big black guys under masks, and gave them to her as a gift. Green then changed her name to Woman.
So Kevin Sullivan gave his wife two big muscular black guys in masks as a present.
Yep.
There is literally no response I can make to that.
Yeah, I'd rather you didn't. I could make a response to that, but it probably wouldn't be very clean, and we'd have to censor that bit quite extensively.
The name Woman, though, I mean, it's a bit boring, maybe even derogatory. I don't know. I mean, her name's actually Woman.
It's a bit generic, isn't it? WCW are trying to make their own evil female manager, like their own version of Sensational Sherry. And what do they call this evil woman? Well, Woman, of course. But if you think about it, this adds a certain mystique to the character. She doesn't do quite as much as Sherry, she certainly doesn't shriek as much or get as physically involved, but she definitely has a presence around her. And the fact that she doesn't really have a name makes her quite a mysterious character. The fact that she's called Woman seems to identify with the power and influence that a beautiful woman would have over the men.
So she's a feminist icon, is that what you're trying to say?
I'm saying that it doesn't feel derogatory with her. Yes, she certainly is eye candy, but unlike some of the other women that we've seen escorting the men to ringside, it feels that the men are working for her, not the other way around. I quite like the way she plays it, really.
I suppose what she also has going for her is that the fact that her new tag team would come out looking like total badasses who are strong enough to match power with the Steiners.
Even at this early stage, the Steiners were famous for stiffing their opponents and not exactly looking after them in the ring. Several weeks after this pay-per-view at Clash of the Champions, the Steiners faced the Skyscrapers in a seriously hard-hitting match. How hard-hitting? Well, Sid ended up with a punctured lung after the match.
Jesus!
With Sid out of the Skyscrapers, his place was taken up by Mean Mark Callis, real name Mark Calloway, who would later show up in the WWF as a sort of zombified mortician.
Well, I don't see that gimmick catching on.
Ha! I remember reading somewhere that Simmons was perhaps the most badass wrestler in the NWA. Not even the Steiners wanted to fuck with him. Flair tells a story about how they used to mess with Butch Reed, but they wouldn't dare to try anything with Simmons. He told Flair that basically he was unfuckable, when Flair asked what would happen if they tried to fuck with him.
You know, but you're a badass when even the Steiners are intimidated by you.
I say that Simmons was perhaps the most badass wrestler in the NWA, but the NWA only, because there was another wrestler that was perhaps the most badass wrestler in the WWF, if not of all time. You see, even Simmons wasn't a badass on the same level as Haku, because, as it's been said before in shoot interviews, there's men, there's wrestling hard men, and then there's Haku.
If you've not heard some of the stories, he's legendarily known to be one of the toughest men in wrestling. In fact, maybe even the toughest man in wrestling.
Yes, he had quite a reputation. He now works as a second-hand car salesman, funnily enough. My favourite Haku story is the time he got pepper sprayed by cops when he was drunk. He laughed in their faces and then broke the handcuffs in front of them.
I'm sorry, what? No, what?
You'll notice that we've not talked about the match yet. Well, there isn't really anything to say. This is not a good debut match for Doom in terms of wrestling quality. After several minutes of hard-hitting action, Scott hits the Frankensteiner and takes Doom number 1 to the floor. That leaves Rick to powerslam Doom number 2. Woman sneaks up and loads up Doom number 2's mask. That allows Doom number 2 to headbutt Rick with the
Loaded Mask of Doom
for the win at the 15-minute 33-second mark. Doom took a little time to gel, but they were a fine team after that. Even though the Steiners lost to this new tag team, they would squash the Freebirds for the tag team titles a few weeks later.
Really quickly, wouldn't a loaded mask hurt you as well?
You'd have thought so, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Wrestling logic, folks.
Either way, next up we've got Lex Luger, and he tells us back in a backstage interview that he'll be the champion for as long as he wants to be. That then nicely leads us up to the match for the US title. Lex Luger versus Brian Pillman.
Before the injuries and the drugs and the shoot interviews, Pillman was an incredible wrestler in the ring. And speaking of things that would never happen today, Luger gets a massive face pop here in Philadelphia, even as a heel.
Pillman escapes a couple of tie-up attempts and mocks Luger. It's hard to pull off a cocky babyface act, but Pillman does it nicely.
Luger then gets cocky and tries to toss Pillman.
Oh my.
Oh dear. So Pillman darts back in and spears him. A dropkick sends Luger to the floor and Pillman chases him around the ring. Back in, Pillman grabs a wrist lock for a bit. Luger whips him into the corner, but Luger blocks his charge with a boot. Pillman goes up for a top rope superfly splash, but misses Luger, allowing the total package to take the advantage.
A big clothesline to the back of Brian's head knocks him for a flip, and Luger gets another big face pop. Again, this is in Philly.
Pillman comes back with a sunset flip and ducks a clothesline, sending Luger to the floor. Pillman hits a springboard clothesline, but Luger is in the ropes. Oh! Pillman goes up and misses a missile dropkick. Pillman goes for a crossbody off the ropes, but Luger catches him in a stun gun for the win at the 16-minute 49-second mark. Good stuff. You'd think of it as a big man versus little man match, but these two didn't look that far off from each other in style and strength. 1989 was a great year for Luger.
Elsewhere, the Road Warriors talk about being underdogs to the Skyscrapers. That then leads on to the Road Warriors with Paul Ellering versus the Skyscrapers with Teddy Long. The Skyscrapers are Sid Vicious and Danny Spivey, and they literally dwarf the Warriors. This would be what JR would call a slobber knocker, because nobody's selling anything here.
Everyone starts slugging it out from the start. Vicious goes down off a flying shoulder block. He then redeems himself by overpowering Hawk during a test of strength. Hawk powers up and monkey flips him.
Whoa, a basic wrestling move!
Sid no-sells though and responds with a helicopter bomb. Yes, really.
What?
A side slam gets 2 for Spivey. Spivey drop kicks Hawk to the floor and Sid drops him on the railing to turn Hawk into the face in peril until Animal gets the hot tag and cleans house on Spivey with a drop kick and a flying shoulder block. But then he turns and goes face to face with Vicious, which gets a huge pop from the crowd.
It all breaks down from very huge brawl erupts, with even the managers both hopping in to have a scrap. Teddy Long then tosses in the gold key of death for an incredibly weak DQ finish at 11 minutes 38. What's with the key?
I've no idea.
Why is it so huge?
It was a bloody crown from a toy shop he had last time, so I don't even remember what the key was for. As for the match, well, call me crazy, but I kind of liked it. Sometimes you just want to see muscle-bound men pound on each other.
What?
Never mind.
Finally, getting away from that conversation, finally we come to the main event of the evening. It's the Thunderdome cage match. Not related to Mad Max.
We don't need another hero.
That. Ric Flair and Sting with Ole Anderson are against Terry Funk and the Great Muta with Gary Hart. 4 men will enter and 2 men will leave.
Possibly.
Hey, making references.
Where's Tina Turner when you need her?
So the Thunderdome is basically what we know today as Hell in a Cell, only this cage is a bit flimsy and looks a little bit wobbly.
The cage has also been draped in skulls, bits of spooky looking trees and some decorative canvas. It basically looks like they've been down to the local pound shop and just bought a shitload of Halloween stuff. Part of the decorative canvas actually catches on fire from the electrified cage. Despite a couple of fellas climbing up there with a fire extinguisher, it is actually the Great Muta that puts the fire out of his green mist.
Yes, seriously. Muta is the only guy in the roster that can prevent forest fires. For this main event, Bruno Sammartino is your special guest referee for some reason.
The only way the match can end is if the assigned manager of a team throws the towel in, if they feel that their guys have had enough. As expected, Gary Hart is the towel boy for Funk and Muta, whilst Ole Anderson has the towel for Flair and Sting. Of course, Ole would become better known in WCW as the genius that came up with such ideas as the Black Scorpion and the Shockmaster. But those are stories for another time.
I can't wait to talk about the Shockmaster.
During the match, Funk acts like a maniac, Sting climbs up the cage and swings on a rope like a face-painted Tarzan, Muta disappears under the ring for no reason, and he's meant to be the same one on his team, and Flair uses all his usual dirty tricks, but he's using them on the heels, so he gets pops for them throughout.
Flair chases Funk up the cage and chops him while he's hanging upside down from the top of the cage, like the Tree of Woe, but on a cage.
Yes.
Flair literally chops the snot out of Funk, as we see from a close-up. Good job there, cameraman.
Ugh, nice. Flair locks in the figure 4 on Muta, and Sting swings from a rope into a dropkick on Funk. Sting tries it again, but crotches himself, and Funk ties him to the cage. This is fucking mental. Muta busts out the Muta lock on Flair. Ole helps Sting get free, and he dives off the high part of the cage onto Funk. Funk appears to have hurt his knee, which just gives Flair a target. He hits a knee breaker. Muta goes up for the moonsault, but Sting crotches him and shoves him to the floor.
Flair then puts the figure 4 on Funk. Well, that was alliterative.
It was, wasn't it?
But then Sting comes off the top with a splash, also onto Funk. And another. Muta tries to attack Bruno Sammartino for some reason and gets knocked back out. Gary Hart then jumps up on the apron to object, so Ole pastes him with his right to the jaw, causing Hart to drop the towel. Bruno sees the towel being dropped and takes that as a submission at 22 minutes and 2 seconds. Yes, really.
Some brutal looking moments during the match, but overall it's not really a classic, and as you can sort of tell from like swinging around on Tarzan ropes and stuff and hanging upside down from the cage with snot hanging out the nose, it does get a bit silly at times. Especially compared to many of the other great main events that we've seen in WCW throughout 1989. However, it's still a fine match that both brought the months-long feud between Flair and Funk to an end. Sting and Muta brings their feud to an end, and it sets up Sting's later title run.
Even if it did get a little bit silly at times, and the ending was a bit of a joke, to be honest. Of course, signs of things to come later.
Overall, this was a good enough show, but it couldn't hold a candle to the incredible double shot of Wrestle War and the Great American Bash that came before it. Still, some good stuff wraps up an incredible 1989 for the NWA.
I thought that Starrcade was the last pay-per-view of the year.
Oh, you had to bloody mention that, didn't you? Just as long as you completely ignore the utterly pointless Starrcade 89 that came a month later, which we unfortunately won't be able to do. But hey, let's not worry about that yet. It's time to give our Match of the Night honours. So, Little Daddy E.
Well, 4 matches. If you want the stiffest match in history and you don't want to see anyone sell ever, then you can go for the Road Warriors.
Road Warriors vs Skyscrapers.
Yeah, let's give them the Never Sells Anything award. I did enjoy. I mean, there were a lot of tag team matches on this card, and I did enjoy most of them. And it looked like at this point there was more emphasis being put on that aspect of the show. The 6-man tag team match was really good.
Also of note was the Luger versus Pillman match, which was an absolute show stealer, and even the main event, whilst a little goofy at times, was still very good. So, this pay-per-view gets a thumbs up from us, despite some utter crap lower on the card. Next time, we will say goodbye to 1989, as far as the WWF is concerned at least, as we take a look at both Survivor Series and the No Holds Barred pay-per-view that finally ends the Hogan versus Zeus feud. It's just as well that the feud ended at this point, because Vince McMahon was seriously wanting to have their main event WrestleMania 6.
Yes, really.
Yes.
But then they brought them back in WCW later.
That's a story for another time. Good God, we've got a lot to get through. So in conclusion, you can find us on facebook.com/the Big Daddy D Reviews. We are on Twitter at the Big Daddy D1. And be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/All-CAW Wrestling 1, as well as my second channel at youtube.com/the Big Daddy D Reviews 1. Please take the time to like and share this video, leave a comment, and subscribe for more.
Yep. Like and share this with your friends, and then you can paint Oliver Humperdinck like one of your French girls.
Oh, good God.
The big kahunas, big kahuna.
Thanks for that.
Yay!
Thanks for putting that image into my head. I didn't want to sleep tonight anyway.